Hey guys, what's up? About 20 minutes ago, the EA press conference at this year's E3 2018 has commenced. And I couldn't do my review instantly after it because I had to take a shower. I felt dirty. I didn't feel clean after watching that. And now I feel a bit better after taking a shower. And I think now I'm in a position to actually review it, go through my notes that I took throughout the show and just review it with you guys together. And I want to do that really with you. So leave your thoughts down in the comment section below. What was your favorite moment? What was your biggest disappointment of it maybe? Share all that down in the comment section below. Currently, if I'm looking at this video of the full EA press conference posted by IGN, about half of the views give dislikes. It's at a 50-50 ratio roughly. And also when you read through the comments throughout the show, it wasn't very positive, but you know, let me put my own thoughts down. They started off with this quite impressive 3D effect on stage where they had like this massive monster coming out of the screen, and I thought, wow, that's cool. They are up for a good start. You know, they've got some good new 3D technology going on, and maybe they do the whole show with these 3D effects. That would have been cool. Unfortunately, they only did it once, only in the beginning, and I think that was probably because it was a post-processing effect. I assume that they must have had the camera movement nailed, and then because they showed it from two different angles, and then they must have imposed that monster on it. I don't think you could see that 3D effect in the room. At least I would have no idea how they did that. In terms of the venue, it was a quite small venue, and they seem to have different venues. There was one that was even smaller, so it seemed to be quite like invite only, not tailored to a big audience, at least not in the room. That's just something I noticed. And already in the beginning, when they showed that monster, that Anthem scene, that big 3D monster, I thought, wow, that looks a lot like Halo. Actually, I thought it's Halo for a moment, which makes no sense because it wasn't the Microsoft conference, but that was my initial impression. They then jumped on to Battlefield 5, and they had a guy coming on stage, and he just gave us a lot of marketing gibberish, and he was like, you know, it was so great, we got so many remixes of this trailer and all that, and I was like, I haven't seen any of those. All I've seen was like hate, pretty much. A lot of people just hated it. Not everyone, you know, a lot of people are like, you know, don't be upset just because there's a girl on the cover, but I think it's more than that. I think people were upset that it's, you know, not accurate, and that it felt much more like kind of a fantasy game than a real authentic World War II game, but you know, that's up for debate. Some people like it, some people hate it, so there's no right or wrong. They introduced a few new features that we didn't know about before. You can jump through windows. They mentioned destruction of buildings in a side sentence, and I'm not entirely sure where that's going, whether you can actually destroy buildings. I don't think so, because if that would be a feature, they would have highlighted that bigger, I think. So probably there are certain walls where you can put holes through or something. I don't know. I don't want to speculate too much, but they mentioned that in a side sentence. And then they proudly stated that there will be no loot boxes and no premium pass. And he kind of waited for the applause, and it came, and it was just awkward. And then it had to happen. They announced a Battle Royale mod for Battlefield. And of course, they tried to twist it and pretend that it's very different and that it's like a very unique take on the Battle Royale gameplay due to it being Battlefield. But it's, you know, it's a Battle Royale mod. There's not that much that you can really do differently. You know, I don't want to judge it. We haven't seen too much of it, but it's kind of, you know, it's the first step. When I made my E3 predictions video, that's one thing that I listed. Everyone is going to have a Battle Royale mod. I think everyone agreed on it, and that was the first indicator of that actually coming true. So there will be a Battlefield Battle Royale mod in Battlefield 5. Then they showed another cinematic trailer that was gameplay based, but they did not show actual gameplay. And I was hoping that they just show like, look, here's like 4 minutes of just actual gameplay, and whenever they show these trailers that just make it look cinematic and everything explode, and it looks like the perfect moment, one after the other, cut together with cutscenes and third-person view and all that, and you just get no idea of the game. Why would they do that if they are confident about the game, right? If they are really confident to deliver an outstanding game, why would you cut such a trailer together and not just show a few minutes of real, authentic gameplay? My theory is that they just, you know, it just looks too much like other Battlefield games. There's just not that unique aspect where when you see gameplay, you're like, oh my god, that is so different from Battlefield 1, right? Like that can't be compared. No, it is actually very similar to the previous games. That's what I'm speculating, at least. Then they talked a little bit about FIFA. I can't say too much about it. They showed a cinematic trailer. They spoke about actually some kind of Vince Staples collaboration, which is cool. I'm quite a big fan of Vince Staples. If you're not familiar with him, into rap and hip-hop music, you should check him out. It's quite good. They spoke about the soundtrack and music by Hans Zimmer, which is cool. One thing I noticed, because they had this moment where they were like, look at the crowds. You can feel the crowds really going wild. And then they showed the shot and the crowd still looked shit. Like, it still looked like a copy and paste crowd. And I was like, look, don't highlight this. Don't put it on the plate, for everyone to see. Make it a highlight of the show if it just doesn't look that good. But they clearly were very proud of it. It's not that much I can say about FIFA because I don't play that game. I don't know much about it. They spoke about the UEFA Cup, the Champions League, and the World Cup and all that. But again, there was nothing really tangible. There was nothing where I was like, okay, look, you can play the exact setup of the World Cup now already. And you can... There was nothing like that really where they amplified or really dug into this idea. They just talked about, and they had the trophy of the Champions League on stage, which I guess for a big football fan is kind of impressive. It didn't do much for me. Then Andrew Wilson came on stage and spoke about weird things, right? That was a moment where I was like, okay, this is going downhill badly. He went on and talked about streaming and subscriptions being like a big aspect of the future of this industry that we're in. And I was like, okay, go on. He then continued to speak about cloud gaming, and they hired a new team in Israel to kind of think up the next level of cloud gaming and where that might be going. It's interesting, but in a nutshell, it's just going to be some kind of game streaming service. And then he went on to talk about subscription, like a subscription-based service, where they talk about Origin Access Premier, which contains Madden NFL 19, which is now coming to PC, that's a big thing, and it will contain FIFA and Anthem. And I didn't really get it. I was like, what are you talking about? What is this subscription service? Why do I need an Origin subscription service to get these? Do I get a discount? Like, do I get games cheaper if I'm in that? It just wasn't clear, right? It just didn't make much sense to me. And then he also spoke about the Vault, right? Which is this subscription service where you basically get games for free every month. Maybe one of you guys can explain that down in the comment section below. I'm pretty sure there will be loads of interpretations in the next days, coming up, explaining this in a bit more detail. But from what he talked about, it just left me puzzled, like a big question mark in my face. Basically, why do I need this? What is the clear benefit, except that, we can now give money to EA every month in some kind of form of subscription? Like, it just left me puzzled. Then the big moment, right, where I was really excited. They switched to see people in the audience. It was like a spotlight on a certain group of the audience. And there was Vince Zampella, who is head of Respawn Entertainment, the guys behind Titanfall, and the guys who, as we know for quite a while, are working on an unannounced Star Wars game. So I was excited. Why would they show Vince Zampella if they don't show the Star Wars game, or maybe Titanfall 3? Excuse me. So I got hyped. I saw them, I was like, oh yeah, we're getting there now, that's good. And all he did was give away the name and when the Star Wars game is happening, right? I was literally, I couldn't believe it. So the information we got is that the game is going to be called Jedi Fallen Order, right? I hope I understood that correctly. It's going to play in like the dark times, basically between episode 3 and 4, where Jedis are just hunted. And he kept underlining that it's a very dark vibe and just trying to tick the boxes of all these hardcore fans who want like a dark Star Wars game. And it's like, okay, why don't you show us like a bit of concept art or like 30-second trailer or 20-second trailer where we see a little bit of what's to come. But there was absolutely nothing except that we got a date, which is basically holiday 2019. So not this year's holiday. We still have to wait 1.5 years basically to get our hands on this game. He announced that at next year's E3 we're going to see more of it, but they showed nothing. And I just wonder, I understand that EA wanted to show something and that they wanted to underline that they are working on it, but that is just, it leaves me more disappointed than I was before, really. My expectation, I like the idea of like a great third-person action game based in the Star Wars universe and the dark ages of the Jedi, Johannes. It sounds all good, but at least show me something to get excited about and not just like words, right? There should have been more. Then, guy came on stage talking about Battlefront 2. And the first thing he did, which impressed me, to be honest, for an EA press conference, was he said, we didn't get everything right. We screwed up on a few ends. That is something that I appreciate, right? That is good that they say this. Because normally how EA does these things is like they just ignore it. They silence it. Nobody talks about anything that went wrong. It's all positive and glory and amazing. So I appreciate, he said, that it didn't all go right. Then he said they're going to launch a few new cosmetics, and like the hunt mod that they launched, this Ewok hunt mod, was the most successful update that they've ever launched for the game, yada, yada, yada. There is now a new squad system where you can play easier with your friends, and it's like, that's a feature like that you can play with your friends. I mean, I think that's a given, right? In any multiplayer game, it should be the easiest thing to get together with your friends and play. I don't know why you announced that as like a separate feature, but all right. He then went on to announce the Clone Wars update. So we're going to get a few new characters in Battlefront 2. One being General Grievous. There is going to be Obi-Wan, there's Count Dooku, and then Anakin Skywalker. And he underlined again that this is all very, very exciting, and everyone who works on it is very, very, very excited about this. Okay, so because maybe otherwise nobody would have noticed that it's really exciting. So you better say that a few times to underline that it is exciting. Switch then to a cinematic trailer. Unravel 2 was announced. Not much I can say about this. I haven't played the first game. It looked gorgeous. It's a very pretty game. It looks like a fun little co-op game that you can play with your friends. Now it has, like I said, a co-op feature. It's a bit different from the previous game. It seems to be, or it was described to be, more challenging. And it's just really like a neat little game you can play on the side. And, there's nothing negative I can say about this. It just looked nice. And it's something I would play with my son. And then as the one of the developers of the game left the stage, another guy came on and he just said that the game is out right now. Okay, so that's cool. That's something I appreciate when you don't say, oh, it's coming, fall 2025. No, it's out right now and you can get your hands on Unravel 2 now, which is cool. So that's nice. They then moved on to talk about EA Originals. So EA Originals is basically their indie game brand. They talked a little bit about A Way Out, which apparently had 2 million players in the first 2 weeks, which is not bad for like a game like that, which is considered an indie game. It still looked quite AAA, I think, but it was a cool idea, and I'm happy that got rewarded. I have a few friends who played that game as well, and they really liked it. They enjoyed it. I think it was a quite short experience. You can play it, finish it in a few hours, but nonetheless, this stuff is cool. I'm happy that they go down that route. Then they introduced a new studio that they're working with, which is a Berlin studio. They're called Jomei, and they introduced Sea of Solitude, SOS. A new game, obviously an indie game, which is apparently all about loneliness. It's very philosophical. You play like this girl. I think it's a pure single-player game, at least it looked like one. And you play this girl which under the water, or it seemed like it's been switching between two worlds, right? When you get underwater, sometimes above water as well, there's this dark world, and then there's this light world, and it seems like you can switch back and forth between those two. So that looked fun. It looked all right, but in an EA press conference, like a company like EA, that should be like a nice side note. Amongst all the other awesome stuff, you should be like, all these things are great, and then there was also this small indie game which looked nice. But it seemed to me that these small indie games are actually the highlight, right? Those were the big announcements, the things that we didn't see coming, and it's just not enough, right? It looked good, and I'm happy that they support these small studios and support these smaller games. It looked good, the game, but it's just not enough for a company like EA. So at this point, I was still waiting, hoping to see more. They then showed a really short clip. It was literally like 15 seconds of NBA Live, and then moved on to Madden. Now, I can't say anything about this. I think this is very much tailored to the American market. Me, as someone who sits in the UK, has no idea what this sport in general is about. I've never played a Madden game in my life. They had this really awkward stage chat where they had like this pro gamer guy who apparently was a pro gamer. I never heard of him. Don't know if he's famous, but he had like this. He won the Madden eSport Championship of 2018, and he brought on this wrestling belt. It looked like a Madden-themed wrestling belt, basically, which was basically the trophy you get when you win that competition. They had another guy on stage, and they just had this really scripted, awkward chat, and it's just those moments where you're like, oh, God, it just gives you shivers down the spine. And yeah, that's pretty much it. I'm sure they announced a new feature. Sorry if I'm not going too much into it, but I don't want to talk about stuff that I don't really know about. So if you want to see more about Madden, then just look at the new trailer. I'm sure they're going to break all the details down in that one. Then it got interesting, right? So they're like, and now we're going to show you a new mobile game. I was like, oh God. They show this game, and it's like a hex field strategy game. So you see it from the top, and you have different fields, and you have 2 bases. And from the start, I was like, interesting. That looks a lot like Command and Conquer, right? It can't be Command and Conquer. Like, if they would bring that game back, then, surely they would make a big fuss of it. No, it can't be. But the more I looked at it, suddenly there were like these harvesters, and then they mentioned GDI, which is like one of the fractions in CNC. And I was like, hold on, that is a CNC game, and that is not the CNC game I want, right? I've been really a Command & Conquer fan. I loved that game. It was one of my favorite strategy games, next to Age of Empires maybe. I really loved playing that. But now they're turning it into this really simplified, dumbed down mobile game. I was really disappointed by that. Now, I don't want to judge it too much because I haven't played it, obviously. It might be good, and you can play the early alpha, I think, on Android now. It's available right now, so if you go to the Android marketplace and search for Command & Conquer Rivals, it's called, you can download that now and try it. Maybe it's good, but me, as like an old school Command & Conquer fan, I was disappointed that they don't bring back like a bigger and bolder version of that game. And then, as if that wouldn't have been enough to destroy this brand of Command & Conquer, Andrew Wilson comes back on stage and he's like, oh, that's exciting, a Command & Conquer for a new generation. And I was like, oh God, man, you're getting it all wrong. Like, oh God, I get it, like a new generation, all the kids are on mobiles and like that's where the future is. I get your thinking, but it just sucks, man. Like, look, other companies like, the Fortnite is coming to mobile, PUBG, all these games, they come from the big platforms and they make them work on mobile, right? But to take a brand like Command & Conquer and just put it on mobile as a separate game, it's just disappointing. I mean, all the fans that loved the brand, in its original state, they're all disappointed and they're all gonna hate on that, right? So you need to build a new community from scratch who needs to learn about Command & Conquer, learn it based on this mobile experience. And I'm not sure that's really going to happen unless the game is surprisingly good. So that was that. And then before they moved on to the end of the show, Andrew Wilson came out one more time and gave a little inspiring speech. Now, that was interesting because he spoke about stuff like, we learn and we listen from the community. We always strive to do better. And I was like, okay, but why then do you talk about these subscription services earlier, right? People don't like these kind of weird subscription services where you have to pay money every month. If you strive to do better, then address that, right? And just because you were forced to remove loot boxes, or it seemed like they were forced by Disney, basically remove all these loot box mechanics from Battlefront 2, which I think now is back in the game. I'm not entirely sure. I'm not playing that game, but it just doesn't feel like you're striving to do better. You say one thing and you do another thing. That's how this feels. Anyway, it became quite an emotional speech, and he spoke about like rewarding the players and adding value and move past the grind, right? So we don't give people these meaningless grind experience. We want to create like meaningful, life-changing experiences for the players. And it's just like, dude, honestly, man, like this is just bullcrap. What are you talking about? Everyone who's watching this is clever enough to see through this bullshit. Meaningful experiences, move past the grind. We've all played EA games. They suck, bro. Like, you should have shown us good games, and then we could have, accepted a speech like that. It was just feeling like he was on a different planet when he gave that speech. Like, he's not living in the same world that I'm living in, at least in regard to gaming. He then lost a few words about charity and that they have this thing that they call Play to Give, and they raised $1 million for a few charity organizations, which I appreciate. It's good to do these things. But to be honest, I mean, companies like Rooster Teeth raise $1 million for charity organizations. You're EA. You're probably a multi-billion-dollar company. You should do a bit more. If you highlight that there, I mean, $1 million is nice, and I appreciate that, but you could do more on that. And if you make that part of your show, then amp that up. amped it up a little bit. All right, and then the big highlight of the show, everyone's been waiting for. At this point, I think everyone was disappointed. You can also hear, like, the applause was not gigantic. You know, people were not happy with a lot of things that were shown, and quite often there were these moments where they're like, no loot boxes, and everyone's like, oh, okay, yeah, now we should applaud. Anthem, the big finale, right? That is supposed to be the big finale. They started off with a cinematic trailer, a lot of world building, a very cinematic trailer. And at that point already I looked at it and it's like, all right, that looks very, very much like parts from Halo and parts from Destiny, just in terms of look and feel. Obviously, I haven't played the game and I can't judge it, but it just looked exactly like a combination between several games. And it felt epic. You know, it does feel like a big, epic, AAA, very detailed, beautifully crafted game, but it's just not unique enough. As you look at it, you're like, you know, if you would show me certain scenes, I literally couldn't tell the difference, whether that's from Destiny or whether that's from Anthem or from Halo or from other games. So they showed a little bit of gameplay beforehand at this GameSpot special thing, which I was watching, where they, you know, just showed a little bit of gameplay. But again, it just reminded me of other games. And it wasn't like where I was like, okay, man, that is really unique. That is a game that deserves its own brand. Like it's a unique piece of creating a new IP, really. It just didn't feel like that. They then tried something different in regard, you know, to how they communicate what's going on with Anthem, and they created basically a small BioWare panel. They had 3 of the key people from BioWare on stage, and people were allowed to ask them questions, or to be honest, the host asked them questions and took, I think, 2 questions from Twitter as well, which obviously were carefully selected. And then they said a lot of interesting things, right? That panel was quite interesting because they said stuff like, it's not an MMO, it changes every time you play it, right? That is something they said. You know, they try to build storytelling into the core of the world. Like, for example, the weather changes. There's a storm and then there's nighttime, and this is in this shared world, and that makes it really unique. And it's not and the more they spoke about it, I was like, yeah, many games do that. You know, it's not such a new thing, right? If you play, let's say, I mean, was 5 years old, if you play GTA Online and you're in the open world, everyone in that world shares the same weather and shares the same world, right? And that's just one example. It's really nothing new. And I just had the feeling that these people in this panel just talked around Anthem without really cutting to the chase. They said a lot of things without saying anything. So they explained that you're out with your friends, right? You do a mission with your friends, and you solve that mission, then you go back to your base, which is then a single-player experience where you basically can hand in the stuff you looted and get rewards and all that. And I was like, yeah, that is exactly how so many other games work, right? There is literally, there was not a single thing in this whole presentation or in this panel on stage where I was like, okay, that's new, right? That's really innovative, that's fresh. So they said stuff like, the world is constantly reshaped in unexpected ways. There are storms, for example. And it's like, yeah, that's not reshaping the world. I think you need to rephrase your shit there, because reshaping the world, you know, if you talk about like Levolution, that stuff that they had going on with Battlefield, at least you could bring down key elements of the world and really change the maps as you went along. But the way they phrased it sounded like, when you play this game now, when you play Anthem now, and then you play it 4 months later, the world is completely different. That might be the case, but from what they showed there, it really didn't look like it. The examples they gave, they kept coming back to the weather, right? The weather changes. That's like the big, constantly reshaping of the world with the weather. I mean, maybe I missed something, but it just didn't sound like they've got a lot going on for this game. I mean, it didn't look bad, but it just didn't really look unique. And then they went into a little bit more detail about the world itself. So they said, for example, there were these gods and they left these tools of the gods behind, which also changed the world. And they promise a very organic, ever-changing world. For example, they said, you know, they can change the law on the go, right? So and I was waiting for them to show me. I was like, okay, cool. You can change the law on the go. That's cool. Like, you do a mission, and then sometimes it ends like this, and you do the mission again, and then it's completely different, right? Depending on chance, and it's always a different outcome for the mission. I don't know. something like this, but they just didn't show any of it. They just talked about it. They then spoke about these suits that you have to wear to protect yourself from the environment, otherwise you would die in this world. And again, right, they had like 4 suits with 4 special abilities. So there is like, they showed one in particular, it's like, what's it called, the Ranger, I didn't write it down, but it's like a classic FPS class. You're fast, you've got rockets and you've got like a normal assault rifle. And then there's like a heavy class. And you can assume that there will be other classes that are inspired by games like maybe Team Fortress 2 or Overwatch, where you have very different classes with very different skill sets, and they really inform how you're going to play the game. So again, they took these cues from another game. And then they highlighted once again that there will be, and that was based on a question from the audience. Oh, we've got a spontaneous question on Twitter here, bringing out this question about will there be loot boxes, right? And they proudly said there will be cosmetics that you can buy, but you will always know what you're going to buy. There's no loot box mechanic. And people applauded. And I was like, dude, that's the bare minimum, okay? To know what you buy is the absolute minimum. This is nothing you should applaud for, okay? This is just normal, all right? To have loot boxes, that's something where people should throw bottles for on the stage. But if you say we don't have loot boxes, you should just be quiet and accept that that's what it is. There's no reason to applaud for that. Anyway, people went all out. They then showed a little bit gameplay. And again, one thing that I noticed is that everything looks very same-ish, right? I mean, obviously, they're not going to reveal the whole game and all the world that they have, but everything they showed, whether it's in the trailers and stuff, it all looked very similar. I think one aspect that could really amp this game up is if you would have different planets, right? You can maybe get into a spaceship, seamlessly fly into space, land on a different planet, and there you have a different mission, and there are just different types of environments, but it felt very much as if they have a certain set of assets that they use and they build one world from it, and everything just looked the same. It was pretty, undoubtedly pretty, but too same-ish for my taste. So in conclusion, talking about Anthem, to me it looked like a mix between Halo, Destiny. I saw some cues from Gears of War, like the gunplay was very much, in my opinion, at parts inspired by Gears of War. The classes inspired by Overwatch, Team Fortress, something like this. And then even a bit of Titanfall. Oh, here's a robot, you get into it, and then now you have this mecha suit. So is this enough? Is this all you have, BioWare? I was really waiting for them to show me something to get me excited. Again, the game doesn't look bad. It's not that I'm like, oh, that looks like a terrible game. It just doesn't look like a unique game. It looks like a replica of stuff we've played 100 times. And if you talk about this being the last big chance for BioWare to kind of save their reputation after the Mass Effect failure, I mean, is this all you have to offer? I'm wondering. Yeah, it looks like that at the moment. So maybe we'll see more in the future. But guys, I mean, I'm so disappointed by this press conference. I don't know what I expected. There were so many people who were in the comment section. They were like, why is there no Skate, right? A new Skate game. People were so hyped. Even in the GameSpot warm-up pre-show that they did, they showed like old Skate gameplay. And everyone was hyped to see a new Skate because there were rumors. But there's nothing. Not to say that they don't announce it separately at, I don't know, Tokyo Game Show or whatever, who knows. But it wasn't there. There was no new Titanfall, right? There was no pictures or anything of the new Star Wars game by Respawn Entertainment. It just left me with a lot of disappointment and loads of question marks. And there literally was not a single new exciting announcement in this whole conference. I mean, besides these indie games, there was nothing that we didn't expect or didn't see coming. So I don't know what EA was thinking putting this together. Probably they just don't have that much to show. Maybe they're just busy sitting around and counting money, not thinking about games. But it very much felt like they've got other things on their mind than making actually good, new, innovative, fresh games. That was my impression. Guys, this is my rant about the EA press conference at this year's E3. Let me know what you thought down in the comment section below. I'd really love to hear your your thoughts on it. Did you enjoy it? Was there stuff in there that got you excited? If I made any mistakes, I mean, this is just a really genuine, instant, review and impressions video of this press conference. So I might have screwed some stuff up. If I did, I apologize. I'm really sorry. But point it out in the comment section. Try to be sensible. Don't be like, hey, you stupid dickhead, you Poland's got this wrong. F you and your whole family. You get that stuff. Be sensible about it. Everyone makes mistakes. I've just shared my opinion. And I'd love to hear yours. So guys, hope you enjoyed the video. Take care. See you next time. I'm out. Bye.